Well, good day, everybody, and welcome back to the show. So, today I want to talk a little bit about what happens when a country stops taking its own defense seriously. Not in theory, not in paper, but in reality on the ground, where readiness, leadership, and capability. We assume that we as Canadians are able to defend ourselves and are prepared for conflict. But is that indeed the case? So today we're going to challenge some long held, I think, beliefs that may or may not necessarily prove to be true. And to do that, I have Lieutenant-General Michel Maisonneuve, is very well respected military leader that this country has both within. He's seen service and obviously as a part of the UN and with NATO, NORAD. Very strategic. He has been the award recipient of the Vimy Award, and we're going to talk about a little bit about that today because I think culture in Canada has changed a little bit, and there might have been some sort of surprises, I think, as a result of administering that speech that he did. And as a graduate of RMC, he's got 35 years of active experience, another 10 years as an academic director with RMC in Saint Jean. And most recently, he's an author, and he has a book called In the Defense of Canada, Reflections of a Patriot. And of course, he's a very sought after commentator. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Lieutenant General Michel Maisonneuve.
Nadine, merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. I'm very happy to be with you today.
Yes, well, you had just mentioned that it's the 155th anniversary of your regiment. So please, by all means, we want to congratulate that.
Thank you, thank you. Le 12e Régiment blindé du Canada, the 12th Armored Regiment of Canada, born on 24th of March, 1871, or at least our tradition goes back to that time. And it's an armored regiment now called Cavalry Regiment up in Valcartier, Quebec. So very proud of them and very proud to be a member of that regiment.
Well, thank you to everybody in that regiment for their service and congratulations on 155. Well,
Feel
sir,
old now.
you're not 155. You look amazing.
Thank you.
So for a lot of our audience, you're brand new to the show. Would you take a few minutes just to give us a little bit of your personal experience and background, and then just maybe some of the highlights of your career?
Sure, I'll take a few minutes. I mean, I was born in Quebec in Saint-Jérôme and lived there until I was 14. And a big change in 1967, my parents decided to move us, and it was for work purposes. My father was working for a company that transferred him to Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. So I went from grade 8 in French to grade 9 in English. I had to learn English, and the lucky thing is I was able to retain my French, and so I'm kind of, able to speak in both languages now, and I write as well. So that was a great thing, although I didn't think so at the time. It was very tough. Then we, after 1 year in Prince Albert, moved to Thunder Bay, Ontario, and I lived there did my high school, went to RMC, really enjoyed going to Royal Military College in Kingston, and then graduated and began my career. Ended up serving 35 years. A number of military missions with the United Nations, with NATO, with the OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, in some bad places in the world. Married a wonderful Air Force major and retired here in 2018. But prior to that, after I got out of the military, I went as the academic director, the principal, if you wish, of the Royal Military College in Saint Jean, which had been closed in 95 and was reopened in 2007, 2008. So I went there to reopen the college and began 10 years as if you wish, academic, managing the academic programs and the academic staff. And in 2018, retired from there and moved to Niagara. We're living in Niagara. Beautiful weather is fantastic. The wine is great, and but was very honored to receive the Vimy Award in 2022, the 30th laureate. And at that time, I decided to make a speech that was going to really comment on what I thought where our country was, and I'd been unhappy with the path our country was taking for many years, and I'd been kind of stewing in that. And I thought, okay, this is my chance when I am presented the award to really say my piece, to be completely open, but to try to end on a positive note, which I did by singing "It's a Wonderful World" by Satchmo. So anyway, but the next day I was canceled, and that kind of began, if you wish, my ability, or it gave me a platform, if you wish, to comment on current issues for our country. Began to write some op-eds in the National Post, particularly, but also a piece in Maclean's and others, and really and that led to the book. And frankly, I think our country is still struggling with many things that I'm sure you want to discuss.
Absolutely. There's so much there to unpack for sure. So let's start a little bit with that speech, because I don't think you were expecting the end result of that to be canceled per se. And I know that these were issues that weighed heavy on your heart after listening to a number of your commentary now. And you really just wanted to bring to light, what you felt were true, real issues that needed discussion, that needed debate, that needed correction. Not that you were presenting any real ideas as to this is the way it should be. You really just wanted to open the door to a conversation, and you never got that. In fact, the exact opposite happened. They canceled you for sharing your views and your opinions and your concerns. Now, you did bring up a number of what I would say red flags, warnings in that speech. And why don't you take us through kind of how did you get to the point where you made the decision to deliver that speech, because you weren't sure if there would be ramifications or consequences, but again, you would assume, living in Canada where we are supposed to have freedom of expression, not necessarily the case. But in delivering that speech, on the day of, how did it feel? I mean, I know the audience gave you a standing ovation, but then on the next day, so what do you think were the most contentious parts of that speech, and why did some people take such offense to it while others embraced it?
Well, first of all, it was an audience of about 650, and people from business, academic world, lots of commentators and reporters, etc., senior military, politicians, and senior government officials as well. So 650 people. It was it's a black tie affair, and it's a wonderful meal and everything. It was right in the Museum of Civilization in Ottawa. And so in that spot, that talks about civilization, but also, the birth of our country. I wanted to talk about the fact that Canada is not achieving the potential that we have. And I kind of went through a whole bunch of different areas where I thought we were not achieving our potential. And really, it was kind of I talked about the extreme progressivism that was going on in our country at the time, and I think it continues to this day. I think is a little bit too much of that. The whole woke system, the whole DEI problem that we have in our country. I talked about about the armed forces and some of the things I didn't think were right in the armed forces. For example, that people could wear whatever uniform they wanted and could have their hair blue and wear all kinds of piercings, etc. So I went through a whole litany of the things that I thought were going wrong, and then I said, this country, for example, I talked about climate change and the fact that we have the greatest resources of any country, perhaps, and certainly at the top of the countries that have resources, but we're not using them to make Canadians richer and to make us more productive, and again to achieving the potential that we have. And of course, I thought, okay, this is a place where I can give my opinion. It is my opinion, and I said, this is my opinion. It's nobody else's. And I did want to create a dialogue. I hoped people would then come forward and say, okay, I agree with what you said on this issue. But I don't agree on this issue, and here's why. And let's have a give and take on exactly on the issues that you raised. And um, it turned out that no one came to see me. Nobody. The next day, started by an academic. I was thrown under the bus, and then a veterans group that I was working with, a veterans center for chronic pain for veterans, and I was I thought doing a good job helping them get known and helping them really straighten out their program and so on. And they were at the dinner, by the way. They had a table or two tables, and everyone stood up for, as you said, a standing ovation. But the next day, word started to come out. Cancellation began, and that center asked me to leave. The board of directors of that group asked me to resign. When I look back, perhaps I shouldn't have done so. My wife says I should have let them fire me. But the point is, that was the cancellation that took place, and so because of that cancellation, as I said, I ended up being able to write some op-eds, and eventually the book came about.
So did that come as a bit of a surprise to you?
The cancellation was a huge surprise. I mean, and my daughter and her husband were visiting a few days later, and they couldn't believe it. I mean, and again, the theme of the speech was not. I was criticizing, I thought, constructively our country, and again, one man's opinion. That was my opinion, and I certainly thought that this would that the reaction that I was describing just a minute ago. I thought that would be the reaction, but no. Instead of that, it was. And again, my wife and I often talk about this, how the left sometimes think of themselves as being so inclusive and being of themselves as so tolerant and everything. And yet they're the ones that are quickest to cancel somebody and to be divisive and not to want to discuss. If you don't agree with them, if you're not part of the normal narrative of the narrative that is going on now, you're seen as an adversary, and that's what leads to cancellation of a lot of the people that speak like that. I mean, Jordan Peterson, for example, trying to cancel him.
Yeah, well, I mean, DEI, unfortunately, I agree with you on most of your points. It's not about inclusion. It's about almost, I find it a little bit like a temper tantrum. It's a very emotional, whereas people on the right tend to, use that left brain a little bit more and they want to find solutions, right? I thought your speech when you delivered it was um, more of the opportunities that Canada was missing out on. I think that's really what you were trying to highlight, was that here we are, this amazing nation with an amazing history, with an amazing identity, with amazing culture. And where is it going off the rails and why? And trying to bring attention to how do we bring it back?
Absolutely, and it was the whole, that's the whole potential issue. That we have this enormous potential. And when you a couple of points when you talk about DEI, what DEI has done really is that the most discriminated against group in Canada right now is the young white male. I mean, it's immediately here he gets shoved to the back of whatever we're trying to do, whatever they're trying to apply for. And the other thing is, I really think that the potential, you talked about this culture, and one of the things I talked about in the speech was what Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau at the time, said about our country, that we were a post-national state with no real culture of its own. Well, that's something we've talked about for a long time, right? We've talked about the fact that we're a Canadian mosaic. And what's a mosaic? It's a bunch of pieces that are held together by grout. Well, I think that the problem is that this Canadian mosaic now, there is no more grout. There's nothing holding us together. I don't think we have been as close to disaggregation of our country as we are today. You look at the separatist movements that are going on in Quebec and in Alberta right now. You think about how we can't even have full interprovincial trade yet. so things are, we're very close now to breaking apart. The mosaic, in my view, is dead. And we need to start thinking more of really, what is a Canadian? What unites us? What brings us together? What makes us a country? I've often wondered whether this country, which is so large, so huge, with so many regional disparities, whether this country can be governed as one country. Is Canada really one country? You could, if we broke apart, would these different pieces be able to survive? Of course they would. There are tiny countries in Europe that do just fine with less population than some of our provinces. So the point is, do we really we want to keep this country together? If we do, we better start thinking about what is our country, what identifies us as Canadian. And once we know that, then any immigrants that come to our country are going to be able to assimilate. And if they don't understand, and if they don't wish to join this country, then stay in your own, and don't bring the strife and the difficulties you have in your country into this one. Because this is what we stand for. This is what a Canadian is, and that's what you're joining. Based on Judeo-Christian principles, which is what our country was founded on. And so, you have to understand, if you're coming to this country, that's what you're joining.
And that's so important today because we're seeing so many people that come into the country more recently in the last decade that don't necessarily assimilate into the culture here. I always tell people, if you bring over there here, we're going to end up with there over here. So, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I thought people came here because they wanted a better life. They wanted the culture. This is why they were moving here. But it seems that in the last decade in particular, it hasn't necessarily been the case. But you brought up a thing there about identity and culture, because when you sign up for the military, you sign up to put your life on the line to defend an identity. Really, it's called patriotism, right? You're defending, and you're seeing right now in Canada, recruitment numbers are obsolete. They're gone. People just don't want to be a part of the military, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think you had mentioned, our military as being weak. I don't think we necessarily have a purpose. I don't think the world takes the Canadian military. I don't think the world takes Canada as a country seriously anymore. But in your opinion, today, because if I'm going to lay my life on the line for something, I need to believe in something. Where have things gone wrong for the military? Like, was there a point where things went from A to B? And I'm in money. I work in the world of finances. Like, I'm always looking at trends. And I see the trend that Canada happens to be moving towards as a very dangerous one, and not one that I particularly care to go down the path of.
Well, there's a lot of stuff there in what you said. Let's talk about the Canadian Armed Forces, first of all. The Armed Forces today are unable to defend our country. Point final. They're unable to defend our country. So if we were attacked, we'd have to fight like with everybody would have to use their personal weapon to fight off the enemy. So there's we're unable to fight in the north. And we don't have enough forces. We don't have the right equipment to defend ourselves, etc. So that is one issue. The issue of recruiting. They continue to say we have met our recruiting goals for this year. The problem is the armed forces are down 15,000, 14,000 troops. So to be able to meet, to return to, where you should be 71,000, what you should be doing is recruiting above what you've always done. Meeting your goals in recruiting means that you're able to maintain where you're at. And basically we need to go beyond that. So there's an issue there. When you talked about people fight for something, yes, you're supposed to fight for your country. You're supposed to fight for for the values of your country. And so if you have a trouble identifying what your country's identity is, it's pretty hard to say, well, I'm fighting for my country. Frankly, people say you join the military and you fight for the person beside you. Well, that's true. But on the other hand, in terms of the country versus the soldier, and I'll use soldier for soldier, sailor, airman, and women, etc. But there's supposed to be a moral contract where the soldier agrees and decides that he or she will fight for the country, put their life on the line if necessary. That's called the ultimate sacrifice for their country. That's one side of the contract. The other side of the contract is the country is supposed to give them everything they need to be successful, will be that equipment, training, leadership, education. And so that contract right now is broken, and we're just trying to bring it back. I know the government's, making a lot of announcements about, more money for the armed forces. They just got a pay raise. That's a really good thing. The government's agreed to go to 2%. That's fantastic. But all this is, it's right now, it's all talk. They've said they're going to buy more equipment. Well, let's see it. Nothing has really come online yet, and so I'm still kind of a little bit, wondering whether it's really going to happen. But I hope it does, because that contract is broken. And the other thing is the honor of service. Serving your country, having the flag on your shoulder, is something that is incredibly rewarding. It's something that young Canadian men and women who do it, they accept that side of the moral contract. And if Canadians are not helping them, giving them what they need to be successful, the contract is broken. And the final thing I would say about the armed forces is, when you accept to join the armed forces, there is a duty to restrict your speech. And when we talked about my speech at the Vimy Award, I was giving my opinion. I was no longer under that restriction, right? I had retired, and I was no longer even a public servant. And so I was giving my opinion, speaking for those who are unable to speak, if you wish. And the interesting thing is, after that, I received emails, texts from serving young men and women who said, "Hey, thank you for saying those things that we are not, and we haven't been able to say, we're not allowed to say right now, because we are serving." So, that was very gratifying. Along with the cancellation, there was some of that was very positive as well. But so the moral contract between the armed forces and their country is broken. The job of the armed forces is winning our nation's wars. And if they don't have what they need to win those wars, well, it means that we cannot first protect our country. Secondly, go and defend our values abroad when we decide to go with our allies. You talked about how on the international scene, our country is no longer seen as serious. Well, it's not. It's not being seen as serious. You're absolutely right. What does our opinion account for? I mean, here we are. We declare that Palestinians are a state, or the state of Palestine. When Parliament's not even sitting, the Prime Minister decides to do that by himself. Palestine is not a state, and how ridiculous. So, did anyone take it seriously? Well, I think people just kind of said, "Well, there's Canada again." Canada using virtue signaling again, trying to school other nations when we really don't have the credibility to do so.
So I want to dive a little bit into because you brought up a couple of things. Politics is politics. It's always a lot of talk. It's about photo opportunities. It's not about actually getting things done anymore. You talk about service here. I mean, the politicians serve themselves, in my opinion. And I, having spent the last 9 years on the fringes, not on the inside, but and around politics, I have been, my eyes have been opened, like, significantly. And I would think that the majority of Canadians still reside where I did a decade ago, believing that politics and politicians have the best interest of the country and of its citizens in mind. And I would argue that that's indeed not the case. Now, I would hope that our military men and women, obviously, when you take an oath to serve a country, you are supposed to be taking an oath to serve its citizens, protecting those ideals, those values. And it is a moral contract, right? Obviously, you're willing to lay your life on the line, but um, w- politics and Carney has committed money. But I have found in my experience with money is money compounds what's already there. So if there are problems there, money will just simply compound the same problem. If there are people who are looking for solutions, then money is a useful tool, right? But it's an amplifier, in my opinion. And money is not always the solution. I think we have a lack of leadership, because if we're going to just throw more money at the same people doing the same thing, what are you going to get more of? The same problems. So, you know, in the military and in armed forces today, and I think you alluded to this in your speech, what are some of the things that you're seeing that I think at the leadership level need to be corrected in order to start, taking the steps in the right direction? I mean, it's great to have the right equipment and it's great to have, the money problem solved. But if we don't have people who are willing to lead us into battle, somebody who understands the battlefield and can navigate through that in such a way, because I think our recruitment numbers are down, not because necessarily of equipment, because if we had culture, we had pride, we had a sense of duty and service, people would still sign up to do that. My dad was a fireman, for example. They weren't the highest paid, let me tell you, but there was a sense of service, a sense of duty, a sense of giving back. There was a sense of pride in being a fireman. And we're not seeing that today in our Canadian Armed Forces.
Well, I don't know if I can say that though. I will tell you, I still deal with a lot of serving personnel, and I mean, I'm impressed with a lot of them, a lot of reservists, for example, and a lot of. Yesterday, I was at a meeting with a couple of senior, like general officers from the armed forces, along with a couple of retired folks, retired generals, and we had a great meeting, and it was very nice to see this young a brigadier general, which I call him young now because I'm old, but and he's got the right leadership, and I can see it, and he wants to do things. You made a very interesting point about what you said about the money. It's true. Sometimes money can just perpetuate the issues that are going on. I think what's important is to have the kind of leadership that says, okay, this is broken, and no amount of tinkering or throwing money at it is going to fix it. You need to actually break the thing and decide that you're going to actually reconstitute it in a different way. I think there are some of those efforts going on in the armed forces right now. I really do think that there's some of that going on. One of the problems, I think, Nadine, is the government has got its fingers into too much. They're using the armed forces and comparing the armed forces to the public service. And a lot of the rules the public service serves on are being applied to the armed forces. That removes a lot of the authority, responsibility, and initiative and leadership of those that are going through the armed forces. And this has been going on, in my view, for about 20 years now. For about 20 years. Right after I got out, I could really see that things were deteriorating in terms of the armed forces being considered just another part of the public service. They are not. They need to have the ability, the authority, and the responsibility, and the accountability, by the way, to make decisions, to structure themselves to do the best job, to defend our country, project our values, and serve with our allies. And you wouldn't believe how much of the armed forces have an impact on how Canada is perceived by other countries. Whenever a ship goes and accosts somewhere in Indonesia, they are ambassadors for our country. Whenever we agree to do a mission with our allies, that gives you huge credibility. Just if you look at President Trump, imagine Canada that had reached its potential. Canada, when he came into power, if Canada had been a strong country with spending enough money on its armed forces, the minimum that NATO says 2% of GDP. If Canada had been a strong resource country and had pipelines going to both coasts and were able to help Asian countries come through. Get greener and get off of coal, and was helping Europe. Instead of Europe buying its gas and oil from Russia, Canada was supplying them. Even supplying our own country. If we were self-sufficient in resources, if we had been that strong country, do you think President Trump would have called us the 51st state? He probably still would have laughed at Trudeau because we used to laugh at Trudeau. But the point is, if we had been a strong country standing on our own 2 feet, he would have never treated us that way. So that all goes towards, the armed forces, and the fact that I think we have some of the leadership in the armed forces. I think the armed forces also have been used as let's say, a social experimentation project.
Mm.
So, the whole DEI that we talked about, I have lots of anecdotal evidence from young Canadians who are trying to join the forces, but they happen to be white and young, and men, and so and they're being all kinds of reasons why. Oh no, sorry, this is taking, and we need another form filled out and everything. Eventually, if it takes you a year to join the armed forces, it's almost, I always say to Barbara, it's almost as if you have to force people to take you. You force the armed forces to take you, and you have to be more resilient than ever to join. Whereas it should be a thing. If you want to serve your country, let's do a background check and see if you're fit, and get you in there and get you trained. I mean, my goodness, we have done it before, much quicker. But right now it's not working. And as I said, they say they're reaching their goals in terms of the strategic intake plan. But I don't think it's the goal that's there to help us go forward and go beyond where we are today, which is too low in terms of personnel.
Well, I think maybe reaching your goals. What are those goals? Because when I look at the military, I mean, I worked with the military for a number of years, and it was one of the
Yeah.
best few years of my life. Like I had such fun. There was such discipline, such a willingness to participate, and people really gave their all. I mean, it was a joy to be around. Now we also had a lot of fun, and it was days when you could poke fun at each other. There was none of this sensitivity. And I
No.
I, I worked in at that time, this is 20 some years ago, my goodness, almost 30, a time when there wasn't a lot of women, around in these roles. So, but I was always treated with the utmost respect. Nobody ever talked down to me, but I also knew my limitations too. The role that I played, I could do training. I had a good solid mind, but I wasn't going to go toe to toe with a 220-pound military man either. But when I think about my military and who I want defending me, I don't want purple hair. I don't want DEI hires. I want the best. And I want the strongest. And I want a warrior mindset, which is not just physically strong, it's mentally strong and it's mentally prepared. And in our military today, the whole DEI, it's nice to have some diversity, but, in what roles? On my front line, we don't want weakness. We want strength. And to your point with Donald Trump he is a bully, right? And he's a strong man, and he is the commander in chief of the largest, strongest, most prepared, military in the world. And he respects that. And it's not just him that sees weakness in Canada. So with the role, like, let's dive into the role of the military and who we want in our military. Because people today, they talk about masculine toxicity. And I'm like, well, if there's one place where you want some masculine toxicity, in my opinion, is your military.
Yeah, well, you talked about the warrior culture, and the warrior culture. I mean, if you're going to have a warrior culture, where would it, be appropriate to have it? It would be in the military. That's what you want. You want people to are prepared to go fight. The whole DEI thing bothers me from the point of view of the numbers, the goals that they're giving. We want X% to be women, X% to be, excuse me, visible minorities. Who said? Who said? Why do we have these goals? I mean, to me, it should be simple meritocracy that is applied so that you get the best and the brightest and the strongest, as you say, who meet the criteria. I mean, you talk about your service with with military and as a woman, and of course, I talk about my wife's service in the book. In the book, yeah, she served 21 years in the Air Force. Started as a private, by the way, in the military police trade. And she will say to anybody who will listen, that every man that she worked with was honorable and protected her, mentored her, helped her to get where she got. And by the way, she was a great leader too for the men that worked in her team and so on. So but that experience goes against the narrative. Those points, the ones you make, the ones that Barbara makes, that goes against the normal narrative that all men are misogynistic in the military, are misogynistic, and they're bullies, and they're racists, and everything. Look, I mean, I think everyone should be able to serve in the military if they can meet the standard. And again, it's a question of standard. Are the standards for a logistics, person, should they be the same as that of an infantry person who's going to be carrying a 60-pound or 100-pound rucksack and going up and down hills and fighting an enemy? Should the standards be the same? Perhaps they should not. We have universal standards, minimum that you need to meet to reach. But then, there should be standards for each one of and there are, in my view, for each one of the different trades. But so, that's a lot to unpack. But I really think that that's where you want your warriors, and you want kind of meritocracy that lets you bring in the best people to do the best job, to represent our country and to fight for our country. And you have to be careful. There'll be the odd bad apple that goes in there, and we've had lots of them. But you know what? It's interesting that a lot of these bad apples have been accused, and a lot of them have been found not guilty, or the charges have been dropped because they couldn't prove it. So there's a juste milieu in all of that, and we have to find it, and we have to. But it all comes down again to I say in the book, and I said it in the speech as well. To fix this country, you need leadership and service. And you've talked about both. I think we really need all leaders at every level, in every area of life. Leaders need to stand up and be leaders. And service, well, Canadians need to get out of their complacency, return to a competitive kind of program, and have an opinion, and serve their country by serving their community, serving their neighbor. The whole spirit of service has been lost, I think, to a certain point. And you talked about toxic masculinity. Yeah, there's toxic masculinity. There is in some areas. There's no question, but there's also a very positive masculinity. And I think the role of men and women right now are so confused. Like we have gender confusion. Mm-hmm. Are you a man or woman or other? I mean, this is no wonder our young people are confused, and there's so much kind of, I think, mental health issues too, because that confusion permeates everything. Whereas, I guess if you go back many years, it was quite clear: a man was a man, a woman was a woman, and of course there were people that were kind of fluid. They existed they've existed forever, but I think now we really are mixing things up.
Yeah. Now, on that note, what are your thoughts on militia? Like, I grew up hunting and fishing with my dad, and of course, I own weapons myself, proficient in using them. And I still remember the first time I ever picked up a handgun and fired it. I was almost in tears because I'm looking at this, and I grew up hunting, with long rifles. Put a long rifle in my hand, no problem. Yeah, shoot, aim. I was good, but a handgun is a very different weapon, and it required training. And for me, I look at it, a lot of this, what's going on today, where the government's trying to take away guns. Guns are the problem. Well, guns are not the problem. People are the problem, right? Illegal weapons are what are being used for crimes. Not we're punishing, civilians. What are your thoughts on? And I've heard you speak a little bit about this, on like civilian militias, because I know, like in Switzerland, for example, I mean, kids grow up with shooting competitions. They grow up around this. Every citizen owns a weapon. They're and I think with the military, there's a sense of discipline. There's a sense of purpose that comes with it. You have a sense of pride that you come away with a trade. What are your thoughts on maybe more of a citizen militia? I know Alberta is thinking about separation, and people talk all the time about, oh, you can never defend yourself. And I'm like, well, it's one of the few, provinces, arguably countries in the world. Don't have rats. Is like, the problem is we've let in all the big ones. We kept out all the little ones. Maybe we need to refocus.
Well, I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, the whole program of return, the gun grab, or whatever you want to call it, is. I think you can obviously see the reaction by the police when police groups decide that they're not going to go ahead and act on this new law. That there are issues here, and so legal gun owners are not the ones that you should be worried about. I think it's like you said, it's the bad people who obtain guns the wrong way, and through some of our porous borders. Some of them come from the United States, and so on. So those are where you need to look. As far as militias or Canadian citizens protecting themselves, I mean. I believe in the reserves a lot, and as of course I've now been on a number of regimental senates for reserve units. Uh, Look, it's incredible when you watch a reservist who this has a job, has a full time job, but decides that one night a week and one weekend a month, and for a few weeks in the summer, are going to serve under the flag of our country in the military. And you're absolutely right. This is a kind of service that to me is incredible to see young Canadians doing that, and so I think we need to put more emphasis on supporting our reserves and giving them the tools they need. Yes, teaching them how to use their weapons in the proper manner, and etc. And we could increase the reserves by 100, 200,000, 300,000. I've heard, sometimes the 400,000 number being talked about in the media. I think this is only a positive thing, and when you think about it, the reserves are the ones that saved our country in World War II, World War One. I mean, it wasn't the permanent force was tiny in both those conflicts. It was young Canadians who decided that, okay, put down the whatever they're doing in their job and pick up a weapon and move to the front line. They did it for us. So we really we should support the reserves a lot more. I think it's also a great way. Sometimes in some small communities in Canada, the only time you see someone in uniform is if they belong to the reserve regiment that happens to be parading on a Tuesday night or whatever, and it's the only time they see somebody in uniform. You know that there are 460,000 veterans in our country, 500,000, and people have served our country. It is a big group of folks, and we need to support them just as much as we support the reserves. Now I'm talking about reserve, about supporting veterans, but it all comes together. It ought to be, when you serve, that moral contract should include looking after you from the moment you decide to serve your country until the moment you actually pass away and die.
Mhm.
Once you take the uniform off, you're a veteran. You should be looked after. Your country should look after you until you pass away.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with that statement at all. Now, one of the things that the Canadian military and some of our leadership politically have stated is that they have sent out a notice to other foreign nationals to come and join our military, our police. They're looking for highly skilled individuals. Now, I can understand why they might want to do that, but I have some concerns myself with people that come from different countries who may not necessarily share our same value system. Are there any red flags on that policy that maybe we should be rethinking or reconsidering?
Well, it comes back to what I was saying about the Canadian identity. If you don't know what the Canadian identity is, what are our values, and you're unable to actually put them into words or explain them to people, how are you going to say, okay, well, you come here and join our armed forces, but we don't know really what our identity is, but you can join our forces, and we'll do a background check. This is all fooling around on the margins. It's all small stuff that is not going to help the armed forces. What we need, I think, is a whole of government effort. And what do I mean by whole of government? It means that, okay, the armed forces need to be fixed. We have a lack of personnel, lack of equipment, lack of training, lack of education, lack of leadership. And so to fix that, we need a whole of government approach. That is the Prime Minister, the Governor General at the top, all the cabinet ministers, all the ministers, and all the secretaries of state, and then all the MPs are going to help fix this. So when we say we need recruiting, okay, we are now going to have a huge program that talks about the honor of serving your country in uniform. We're going to have a program that's going to be driven by the Prime Minister himself. It's going to go all the way through the cabinet ministers. I once spoke to a group of MPs, and I said, put your hand up, those of you who have in your writings, who have military installations or military contractors, etc. I mean, you know what? It was about 70% of them put their hand up. So, it's all across the country, and our MPs should all be supporting the armed forces. So, but it needs the impetus. The honor of service has to be promoted from the highest level, and then the actions need to follow right at the bottom. So fooling around with a few permanent residents who are going to decide to join, that's okay. That's good if they want to do it, if they achieve the standards, and if their background check comes out clean. But that's not where you're going to get the majority of people. You're going to get them from ordinary Canadians who will be enticed by the fact that they're going to serve their country, who are going to be enticed by the fact that they're going to be equipped with the best equipment going, the best rifle. We're buying new rifles. About time. The best pistol. We're buying new pistols. About time. The F-35. That's the greatest recruiting tool you'll have right there, the F-35. You're going to work on this airplane, or you're going to fly this airplane if you join the armed forces. I mean, why do we fool around with this? It's been 15 years now. Prime Minister Harper should have made the decision. I've told him, but and that's the only, it should have been done then. And of course, Trudeau should have made the decision. We should already have made the decision. If we had, we'd be flying that aircraft now the way Norway is and the way the UK is, and of course Americans. So boy, there's a lot of work to be done, but it needs to be a whole of government thing that starts from the top and permeates all the way across in terms of explaining the honor of service, and then how wonderful it is. And you talked about fun. My 4 leadership principles are communications, teamwork, professionalism, and the last one is fun. Because there is fun to be had. Unless you're under artillery fire, that's not fun. But any other time, you can have a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So, with respect to that, you just brought up 4 principles, and you've brought up leadership. If you had a message to deliver to the Prime Minister, for example, on how to turn this around, what is it? What would you say?
Well, if I had a message from our Prime Minister, I would talk about more than the armed forces. I would talk about our country generally, and I would say, first of all, we need to focus on unity, making sure that Canadians understand their identity and that we're all held together by more than just a grout from a mosaic. We need to really get a grip on our unity, interprovincial trade, and make our country strong from that point of view. The second piece I would tell them is, we're about to be bankrupt. We're spending way beyond our means. We're not exploiting our resources. So we really need, that's the other piece of being a strong country, is to ensure that economically we have enough money to be able to do those things that we want to do. And the third thing I would say is that once that is done, then internationally, we need to demonstrate that we have the leadership necessary to lead other countries. Prime Minister Carney talked about the hegemony of these huge countries now that time is past. It's the middle powers that are going to group together. Well, that's fine to talk about it, but I haven't seen any leadership from him to bring all these other middle powers together. So, if he means it, and if we achieve our potential, then we can be leaders in the world. As far as the armed forces go, I would say, stop making promises and let's have some delivery. Deliver the goods now. It's time to deliver. And I mean, starting up new bureaucracies like the Major Projects Office and the Defense Investments Agency and all that's just great stuff. But I want to see some results, and we have no results so far.
Yeah, that's unfortunately politics. It's about photo ops and, speak. It's not usually grounded much in results. And I think a lot of that boils down to the fact that there's just no accountability anymore. As far as Canada being bankrupt, we are one of the richest countries in the world, in natural
Unbelievable.
resources, water, uranium, potash. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, gold reserves. And yet here we are, oil and gas. And here we are, we're not developing our own resources to even service our own people. We talk about the price of oil going up because of the situation in Iran. Why would that have to happen when we have oil right here in the ground? We have natural gas right here in the ground. If we have pipelines that just ran across our own country, it's like, you know,
Exactly. If you look back to 10, 12 years ago, if we had already built pipelines that were going to take, and we were energy self-sufficient right across the country, we'd be laughing now. And if we had terminals that we could export those resources on each of our coasts, even with the Iran issue that's going on now, our prices in gas wouldn't have gone up because we'd be getting, we'd be helping other countries, but we would be self-sufficient, not having to look at anybody to get our oil. I mean, Quebec gets some of its oil from, I can't remember now, it's Venezuela, I think, or, I mean, anyway, don't quote me there, but the point is that we are not able to even supply ourselves with our own energy.
yeah, no. And so with that, let's talk a little bit what's going on around the globe today. So, Canada is opted not to participate with the United States. Carney came out with very strong words for Donald Trump, and he was the only one who could deal with Donald Trump and elbows up. We've seen that really hasn't worked out. Again, a lot of talk, not a lot of results. Canada, as you've pointed out, can't defend itself, let alone the Arctic. And the Arctic, I think, is going to, I mean, you're a very strategic man. You understand the military positioning of the Arctic, much like Greenland, which I think is what the United States is looking at now from a perspective of the world is changing. The superpowers, the powers are changing. And I think the United States is trying to position itself somewhat to protect that northern hemisphere. I mean, the Monroe Doctrine was based upon this to a certain extent. So looking at where Canada is today and how we are almost distancing ourselves, we're driving a wedge, in my opinion, between our greatest ally and our I hate to say it, our big brother, our best friend. We share a 100-mile border with the United States. And I don't think this is serving us well. Like, what's going on here? What do we need to do to fix this? Because Canada can't defend itself. If somebody wanted to come in and take Canada tomorrow, we are completely reliant on the United States to protect us.
And again, that's a result of us not looking after our own defenses and not being a strong country, not just militarily, but economically.
Yeah.
And of course, we always thought the United States, yeah, we're going to be our best friends forever and everything's great. But, you can understand why President Trump is frustrated because, people have been picking on the United States. They've been paying more money than anybody else in NATO, paying more dues to the United Nations than anybody. Where's the United States Nations headquarters? Right in New York. So I would imagine that the rental cost there is not too bad, that the U.S. is letting them stay there. But everybody picks on the U.S. And when something goes wrong in the world, the U.S. is the one that always goes and helps fix it. So I'm a huge supporter of the United States. I think I can understand why President Trump is behaving a lot of the behavior he has. Maybe he's not the guy I would invite to my dinner table, although I hear he's charming. But I can understand why he's doing some of the things he's doing. So if Canada had already been strong, as I said earlier, if we'd already defended it, being able to defend our country, participated and had strong armed forces, great resource development, and we're a strong country economically, he wouldn't have treated us this way. But we are where we are today. So what we need to do is get ourselves organized, and you talk about participating in Iran and in some of the actions that are going on. I mean, the point is, what do we have to participate with? I mean, we have a few ships able to sail right now, but again, not enough crews to crew the entire Royal Canadian Navy. We don't have enough crew persons to crew the ships. So we've actually put some alongside, and they're no longer being used. We have a small commitment of about 2,000 people in Latvia with NATO. We're so-called commanding a multinational brigade. But again, that contingent is so small, and it takes the entire armed forces to support that contingent to make sure it's persistent and can be sustained out there. So that's very small compared to what we've been able to do before. We've had times when we had 4,500 people on operations across the world, and we're able to continue to sustain them over and over again. So we have done it before. We need to get back to that. But first, we need to fix our own problems in terms of getting the personnel in, getting the equipment in, and all that stuff. So we'll see what happens. But again, I thought that the whole Strait of Hormuz thing was a place where when the Prime Minister talked about how small countries should come together and be strong and collaborate. Perhaps that could have been a place where it could have been done with leadership, but who was going to lead it? Was Prime Minister Carney? Was it Prime Minister Starmer? Was it Macron? I don't know, but the point is that something could have been done by. And by the way, I don't think. I mean, Canada has the potential to be as strong, if not stronger, than Germany, France, the UK. From all points of view, from the economic point of view, from the military point of view, we have that potential. And why are we not reaching it? Well, it comes back down to complacency of Canadians, their desire to, be nice and not talk, not really. Many Canadians don't even have an opinion. I mean, they vote for the person that they think is going to, be nice and tolerant and everything. And like you said, they thought Prime Minister Carney was going to be able to deal with President Trump. Well, we see where that's gone now. They've met 7 times, and are the tariffs down? No, they're not. I mean, things are still going on, and he's calling us, 51st state again, and Governor Carney. So, I don't know. It all comes. We need to fix our country before we can fix anything else, including our relationship with the United States.
Well, I keep telling people, Trump is a temporary situation. Our relationship with the United States is rather permanent. It's a long-term relationship. Trump is at some point going to go away and going to be
Yeah, we
replaced by.
can't move, right? You can't pick up and move the country because we're going to be alongside them, forever. So
Absolutely. So I think it's time for people to stop blaming, Trump for all of Canada's woes. I mean, I think Canada's woes are a result of
self-inflicted.
self-inflicted. I mean, even the Bank of Canada came out and said that we have systemic problems like in our economy. They're not problems that the bank can fix or anybody can fix. They're policy problems, which goes back to leadership. I see what we have today as a bunch of managers installed in our government, and they're just managing decline. And as a matter of fact, the policies are just expediting that decline rather than, solving the problems. There's a true lack of vision of what could be and a true lack of leadership, because that's what leadership is. It's about doing what's not necessarily popular, but what's right, and it's about taking the actions to get to the end result that's needed. So, any
Absolutely. I
final
mean,
word?
yeah, I was going to say, on that note, there are, I didn't realize this, but 1 out of every 4 Canadians is employed by a government agency.
Yeah.
So 25% of all working Canadians work for government. Isn't that incredible? And yet our productivity, we are 39th out of 39 nations in the OECD. In terms of our projected growth, our productivity growth into 2030. I mean, how incredible is that when we have this enormous potential? So, look, I'm a proud Canadian. I love this country. I am saddened by what's happening, but I think we need to just get our head out of the sand and start performing. We need leadership. We need service, and you've talked about that as well, Nadine. So, thank you very much for having me.
On the productivity front, it's even worse. The OECD has predicted that, we've been the worst performing country for the last 10, 20 years. But
Mm.
they're projecting Canada to be the worst performing country for the next 30 years, like all the way through to 2060. And that's embarrassing, to be honest. I mean, to have the number one resource in water, potash, uranium, nickel, and
Yeah,
to not
yeah.
be able to get it out of the ground and do some oil and gas. I mean, it's sticking in the ground, it's
Much
staying in the ground.
regulation, too much regulation, no investment, too much compliance issues, red tape, gatekeepers, as somebody's term has been used before,
Yeah.
bad labor relations, too much administrative tariffs and taxes, and interprovincial barriers. I mean, my God, some simple things to fix. I know they're not simple, but with the desire, with the leadership that you talked about, that's what we need to do.
Well, we know you're a wine drinker, so you want all those great, BC wines coming east, right?
Yes, absolutely. I would be happy to taste them and to send some Ontario wines out there. So,
As around that Niagara region for sure. Any final words for our viewers? I mean, the world is a very strange place today. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unpredictability, and of course, I do believe that we lack leadership. I don't think anybody has a real vision. I think there's a lot of personal agendas that are being fulfilled. I won't say Brookfield, is. But Brookfield, that people, and war is very profitable as well. I mean, I've watched this, I owned an aerospace and defense company, and I kind of stepped back from that when I figured out where the next wars were going to be fought. And a lot of it had to do with money, just simply money, you know, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, no central banks. And I don't know why that came to me when it did, but it was disheartening, when you stop and you think about sometimes conflict is profitable. I mean, sometimes it's necessary, but I think sometimes it can be avoided. And what would you have to say to Canadians, and any final words to anybody who might happen to be listening? I doubt if Carney is listening, but hey, maybe you never know. It might be that one section that gets clipped out and sent to him.
well, yeah, you never know, but I think we just can't lose hope here, and I think we need to get the leaders in place that will give hope to Canadians, to young Canadians particularly, and that will make our country better, and help us achieve the potential that we have. And let's stop being complacent, and let's get out there and give our opinion, and let's debate issues, and let's hear different points of view, and let's come together as a unified country, and under a strong leader. And as I say, we need kind of leaders who are going to give us hope, and get our head out of the sand, and fix what ails our country. And there are a lot of things that ail our country. So,
Oh,
merci beaucoup.
Michelle, thank you so much for being with us today. Very much appreciate you taking the time and sharing your thoughts with us and your expertise and your wisdom. So, God bless, and we will hopefully do this again.
God bless you as well. Take care.
Merci. Well, everybody, hopefully you enjoyed that. Please do please do share, please do, send this message out. And one of the things I think you notice on this show many, many times is we talk about a lot of the problems, a lot of the conflicts, but we do try to dive into some of the solutions, things that you can do as a citizen of this country to make things better. And hope. Don't give up. Whatever you do, that is the easiest thing to do, but it's cowardice, and it's what they want you to do. So, we do need leadership, and leadership, I think, in this particular case, starts from the ground up. So, thank you to Lieutenant-General retired Michel Maisonneuve for taking the time today to come and share his thoughts and wisdom with us. God bless you all.